The streets of London have always possessed a unique capacity to reflect the changing fortunes of those who walk them, acting as a grand stone-carved theatre, where the highest dramas of human ambition, lineage and reputations play out before a global audience. In the heart of this ancient metropolis, beneath the unpredictable grey skies that have witnessed centuries of royal triumphs and sudden falls from grace, a modern spectacle is currently unfolding, one that carries the heavy weight of an impending institutional reckoning. For months, the global public has watched a carefully choreographed sequence of events designed to reshape a very specific narrative, a strategic effort to pivot away from years of bitter public acrimony and toward a new era of dignified philanthropy and global leadership. This highly anticipated return to the homeland was meant to be a masterclass in public relations, a sophisticated redemption tour calculated to restore a sense of gravitas, authority, and unassailable purpose to a figure who has spent years navigating the turbulent waters of self-imposed exile and intense media scrutiny. The atmosphere in the capital was charged with expectation, as observers and critics alike prepared for a series of high-profile appearances centered around a celebrated international charitable initiative. An event explicitly designed to showcase compassion, resilience, and the enduring power of a royal legacy stripped of its traditional constraints. Yet, just as the cameras began to roll and the carefully curated images of goodwill were set to dominate the international headlines, an invisible but devastating shift occurred behind the scenes, turning what should have been a triumphant homecoming into a complex, isolating psychological battleground to truly understand the profound tension hanging over the city today. One must look beyond the immediate glare of the flashbulbs and examine the intricate tapestry of ambition and vulnerability that defines the modern pursuit of public validation outside the traditional structures of hereditary power. When a prominent individual chooses to sever ties with an ancient, deeply entrenched institution to forge an independent path on the global stage, the stakes are invariably absolute, leaving no room for error or weakness in the court of public opinion. Over the past several years, the world has witnessed a relentless effort by this displaced elite to construct an alternative empire of influence, one rooted in contemporary ideals of humanitarianism, high-stakes public speaking, and multimedia dominance. This quest for relevance requires a delicate balance, an ongoing negotiation between the undeniable allure of a historic title and the commercial realities of modern celebrity, where one is only as valuable as the credibility one commands. The strategy seemed clear enough, involving a deliberate shift toward more serious, heavyweight engagements intended to position the individual as a credible global statesman, an influential voice capable of addressing profound societal issues on the world stage. However, this ambitious architecture of influence relies entirely on the foundation of an unblemished reputation, a sense of inherent authority that compels international donors, corporate sponsors, and sovereign entities to invest their capital and trust in the brand. If you value deep investigations into the shifting dynamics of global prominence and the hidden realities behind the world's most scrutinized figures, please take a moment to consider subscribing to our channel, ensuring you never miss our comprehensive updates as this extraordinary narrative continues to unfold. When that essential foundation of credibility is suddenly and systematically challenged by the very institutions designed to uphold the rule of law, the entire structure begins to shudder, exposing the profound fragility that lies at the heart of an independent royal enterprise. The current crisis did not emerge in a vacuum, but rather represents the culmination of a long-running, multifaceted struggle against the forces of traditional authority and the remorseless mechanism of the public record. For a long time, the narrative was maintained through a series of carefully managed media releases, emotional appeals, and high-profile legal challenges aimed at rewriting the rules of engagement between a modern celebrity couple and the state apparatus. There was an expectation that sheer willpower, combined with the immense global curiosity surrounding their lives, would force a capitulation from both the media landscape and the establishment, securing the specialized privileges, armed protection, and uncritical adoration that had come to be viewed as an absolute necessity. Instead, the reality of the past 48 hours has delivered a profound psychological blow, an institutional verdict that cuts directly to the core of this carefully constructed identity and threatens to permanently dismantle the illusion of global authority. It is an experience of profound isolation, walking through the very city that once celebrated your birth and defined your identity, knowing that the doors of your ancestral homes are firmly closed and that your presence is viewed not with royal warmth, but with a sense of clinical, administrative detachment. The grand promises of a new, independent life of global impact are now forced to confront the harsh, unyielding reality of a system that refuses to bend its rules for personal grievance or historical sentimentality, leaving a once celebrated figure to navigate the cold realities of a budget existence within sight of the palaces that once defined his world. As the daylight fades over the historic architecture of central London, the true scale of this strategic disaster is becoming impossible to ignore, transforming a planned celebration of resilience into a stark exhibition of professional and personal defeat. The meticulously planned timeline of this visit, which had been in development for many months with the hope of generating glowing headlines and touching family reunions, has instead dissolved into a chaotic series of logistical misunderstandings and public rejections. There is a palpable sense of anger and frustration radiating from the temporary quarters where this drama is unfolding, a bitter realization that the ultimate gamble for institutional validation has resulted in a devastating loss of stature. The grand designs of an international brand meant to rival the influence of established states and global philanthropies are now overshadowed by a mounting sequence of institutional setbacks, fractured relationships, and a profound crisis of credibility that threatens to alienate the very corporate entities and high net worth donors required to sustain such an ambitious lifestyle. The illusion of a triumphant return has been completely shattered, replaced by the grim reality of a lone figure standing in the shadows of an empire that has moved on, forcing an agonizing re-evaluation of what it truly means to lose the protection, the prestige, and the ultimate authority of the crown. The illusion of control has completely evaporated in the wake of a devastating High Court ruling that has fundamentally dismantled the strategic foundation of Prince Harry's independent public life. This legal verdict, which many close to the situation expected would take several months to materialize, arrived with the sudden force of an institutional guillotine at the worst possible moment, precisely as the Duke of Sussex landed in London to promote the Invictus Games. What was meticulously engineered to be a grand redemption tour, a calculated showcase of global leadership and humanitarian excellence, has transformed into a profound public humiliation that strikes directly at his ego and disrupts his carefully laid plans. The core issue now confronting the global audience is the total erosion of his credibility, a collapse of authority accelerated by a judge's explicit determination that the prince is simply not a credible witness on the stand. For an individual who has aggressively shifted his public persona over the last year, attempting to rebrand himself as a heavyweight international statesman by appearing in war-torn regions, challenging political leaders, and writing academic commentary on societal prejudice, This judicial assessment is catastrophic. Commercial entities, high net worth donors, and global speaking bureaus do not invest millions of dollars in a figure whose testimony is legally branded as unreliable, and this reality severely jeopardizes his long-term financial viability. Furthermore, the loss of this legal battle effectively terminates his persistent quest for taxpayer-funded, armed police protection during his visits to the United Kingdom, rendering his dreams of a secure, dignified royal-style return structurally impossible. This latest courtroom defeat is not an isolated incident, but rather the capstone of a compounding crisis across the entire portfolio of the Sussex's charitable and commercial enterprises, exposing a pattern of mismanagement and declining influence. In the realm of international philanthropy, where the Duke once commanded automatic respect, the ground has completely shifted as his own foundational initiatives turn against him in spectacular fashion. He is currently facing a highly damaging defamation lawsuit initiated by Centerbale, the very charity he co-founded in Lesotho to support vulnerable children, marking an unprecedented civil conflict between a royal founder and his own legacy project. Simultaneously, his position on the board of African Parks, an environmental organization where he previously served as chief operating officer, has been severely compromised by harrowing, widespread allegations regarding the systemic abuse of local African tribes by armed rangers. Even the flagship Archewell Foundation, designed to be the primary engine of their global philanthropic footprint, has been plagued by administrative errors and regulatory interventions that have effectively shuttered its operations at critical moments. Meanwhile, the Invictus Games, widely considered Prince Harry's crowning achievement and his sole remaining bastion of universal public goodwill, is reportedly hemorrhaging major corporate sponsors who are eager to distance themselves from the increasingly toxic Sussex brand. This corporate retreat mirrors the historical collapse of fundraising revenue at Centerbale, detailed by investigative journalists, where the couple's highly politicized, self-absorbed approach drove away long-term partners like Audi and left the organization struggling to generate basic revenue. The logistical reality of this current trip further highlights the profound isolation of the prince. Exposed through a bitter war of words between the Sussex camp and Buckingham Palace regarding his accommodation in London. Prince Harry's team had been planning this specific UK visit since January, and for several months a highly generous offer from King Charles remained on the table, granting his son access to a secure royal residence. However, demonstrating a characteristic pattern of entitlement and administrative chaos, Harry failed to meet the strict Friday deadline for accepting the palace's hospitality, formally rejecting the offer before changing his mind over the weekend. This sudden reversal occurred after his personal security team pointed out that there is quite literally no safer place in the United Kingdom than inside the fortified walls of Buckingham Palace. When Harry attempted to re-engage, the palace administration was forced to deny the request, pointing out that preparing a major royal residence requires weeks of precise planning, staff deployment, catering logistics, and intense security screening. The palace is currently operating as an active construction site and an administrative office rather than a lived-in hotel, and accommodating a sudden request for a 4-person family plus a massive private entourage on 24 hours' notice was deemed a severe waste of institutional resources. This logistical failure underscores a deeper psychological delusion, demonstrating that the Duke still erroneously believes his father can simply snap his fingers to alter constitutional realities, bypass security protocols, or influence independent judicial proceedings to rescue him from his own poor decision-making, as the prince navigates this administrative and personal wreckage from a central London hotel. His mental state is described by those familiar with the situation as one of absolute fury and intense resentment. Rather than allowing this high court defeat to humble him or prompting a serious re-evaluation of his strategy to litigate every public headline and grievance dating back 15 years, the verdict has only fueled his deep-seated anger. This obsessive focus on historical grievances has also introduced bizarre, uncomfortable tensions into his domestic life, particularly regarding the strange prominence of his former relationship with Chelsea Davy during his High Court testimony. For days, the international public listened to a married prince openly lamenting how media intrusion destroyed his past romance, a public display of emotional pining that creates an incredibly awkward dynamic for his current wife, Meghan Markle. The Duchess of Sussex now finds herself in a profound professional jam, confronting a reality where her husband is transforming into a public symbol of perpetual defeat rather than a winning global commodity. Historically, whenever the Duke faces severe public backlash or legal failure, the Duchess systematically vanishes from his side, executing a strategic disappearance to protect her own individual brand from his public misfortunes. She was famously absent during the intense public mockery surrounding his memoir, missing during his previous legal failures, and she is noticeably missing from this current London itinerary despite initial public relations teasers suggesting a joint appearance. In the cutthroat world of international celebrity and commercial branding, a figure's utility is defined entirely by their success, and as Prince Harry continues to absorb devastating institutional blows, he increasingly finds himself in a very lonely, isolated position on the world stage. The long-term consequences of this compounding institutional failure stretch far beyond the immediate embarrassment of a single trip, signaling a permanent realignment in the relationship between the House of Windsor and its most estranged members. For King Charles, who continues to perform his constitutional duties while undergoing treatment for cancer, the situation requires an unyielding commitment to the stability of the crown over personal familial sentimentality. The king has consistently demonstrated a desire to be fair, reasonable, and constitutional, refusing to pull strings or subvert state mechanisms to grant his son the specialized royal privileges he desperately craves. This disciplined distance was explicitly maintained when the king previously advised Prince Harry against pursuing aggressive, counterproductive litigation against major media publishers, a warning that went unheeded and has now left the Duke with massive legal bills. The financial reality of these failed legal crusades is staggering, building upon previous courtroom disasters where the Duke was forced to abruptly withdraw legal actions and absorb millions of pounds in combined costs for both sides. This ongoing financial hemorrhage arrives at a time when their primary commercial engines, including lucrative multi-million-dollar production deals with global streaming platforms, are under intense pressure due to a lack of authentic, high-quality content that resonates with the public. The international market has largely rejected the victimhood narrative that the couple has attempted to monetize over the past 6 years, leaving their media production companies scrambling to pitch new concepts that major networks are increasingly reluctant to finance. The absolute breakdown of this independent royal enterprise is further emphasized by the total absence of the Duke and Duchess's children from the United Kingdom, ensuring that the king remains profoundly isolated from his youngest grandchildren. It has now been 4 years since the monarch last interacted with these children in person, a tragic reality underscored by the king's advanced age and ongoing health challenges. The strategic decision by the Sussexes to withhold the children from visiting their paternal family, while simultaneously ignoring the maternal side of the family represented by Thomas Markle, exposes the transactional nature of their approach to family dynamics. This selective pursuit of family connection appears less about genuine reconciliation, empathy, or compassion, and far more about a desperate desire to maintain a tangible link to the royal aura for commercial branding purposes in the United States. There is a profound irony in the spectacle of young American citizens being raised with historic British titles of Prince and Princess while running around playgrounds in Montecito, particularly as the United States prepares to celebrate the grand milestone of its 250th anniversary of independence from the British Crown. This insistence on maintaining and exploiting royal status, despite an explicit rejection of the duties, discipline, and geographical realities that give those titles meaning, has alienated both the British public and the international community, transforming what could have been an influential philanthropic legacy into a transparently commercial endeavor. The underlying motivations behind Prince Harry's desperate attempts to align his public actions with the official agenda of Buckingham Palace reveal a calculating, deeply flawed strategy to simulate a continued royal relevance. Observers have noted an uncanny synchronization between the Duke's choice of public topics and the long-established philanthropic focus of the King, leading many to believe that the Sussex team is actively using inside knowledge of the royal calendar to manufacture a parallel agenda. Whether addressing geopolitical conflicts, participating in global summits, or publishing commentary on societal issues, the effort is designed to make the Duke look seamlessly aligned with the crown, keeping the illusion of a future royal return alive for corporate backers. This strategy relies heavily on the hope that the public will buy into what they are selling. Yet the reality remains that an independent royal brand cannot survive without authentic credibility, a quality that has been utterly shattered by consecutive judicial failures and organizational scandals. The Invictus Games, which should remain a sacred space for the celebration of wounded veterans, has instead been criticized for transforming into a highly commercialized celebrity showcase, where public attention is routinely diverted toward high-fashion outfit changes and carefully staged promotional opportunities rather than the achievements of the competitors. This shift towards self-promotion has created deep resentment among traditional donors and organizers, who feel that the core humanitarian mission of the charity is being actively cannibalized by the toxic personal brand of its patrons. The professional prognosis for the Sussex partnership is now inextricably linked to the strict legal realities of their chosen home in California, introducing a fascinating long-term timeline into their public and private trajectory. Under California law, the duration of a marriage plays a critical role in determining the long-term division of assets and ongoing financial support, with a distinct legal threshold established once a marriage crosses the 10-year mark. Having moved to the state at the end of 2020, after their initial departure from the United Kingdom, the couple is rapidly approaching a decade of joint residency in a jurisdiction that heavily favors the long-term protection of individual interests based on martial longevity. This legal reality adds an underlying layer of scrutiny to their public appearances, as the history of high-stakes celebrity culture demonstrates that professional failure and intense public backlash invariably place immense strain on domestic partnerships. When the grand promises of international dominance, cultural influence, and unassailable global popularity collapse into a series of public rejections, high court defeats, and cancelled corporate contracts, the foundation of a shared global enterprise begins to fracture from within. Prince Harry now finds himself trapped in a cycle of his own making, unable to return to the protective embrace of the institution he discarded, yet fundamentally unequipped to survive the unforgiving commercial realities of the independent path he chose to forge. Ultimately, this entire chapter serves as a stark, modern parable about the immutable nature of institutional power and the high cost of trading hereditary duty for the volatile currency of contemporary celebrity. The grand architecture of the British monarchy, built upon centuries of tradition, legal structure, and an unyielding commitment to public service over personal ambition, has proven entirely resilient against the aggressive public relations campaigns launched from across the Atlantic. The individual who once occupied a secure, highly respected position within that historic framework is now reduced to navigating the cold realities of an isolated global figure, enduring devastating legal verdicts in the morning and retreating to temporary quarters in the evening without the comfort of family or institutional support. The glossy headlines, the historic family reunions, and the triumphant public imagery that were meant to define this London visit have been replaced by a quiet, undeniable narrative of professional